welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In the series on economic sociology, in today's lecture, we are going to discuss on a sub-discipline called new economic sociology. In this lecture particularly, the focus would be to understand the three traditions which helped in the emergence of this sub-discipline called new economic sociology. So, by 1960s, the difference between economics and sociology was at its peak in the United States. Sociologists were least interested in economic topics and economists stayed away from social problems. However, 1970s, this bitter relationship between the two started to subside and a tentative dialogue began. However, the reception towards this merger was different. Some economists felt that certain part of economics can be improved with the help of sociology, while others thought that some of the problems of sociology could be solved by using an economic approach. So, there was no kind of a consensus among the economists and sociologists for the development of a combined discipline. Scholars like James Coleman, Missel Hecher agreed with the theory of economist Gary Becker and Mancur Olson that a rational choice perspective is needed in sociology. So, the argument was that sociology as a science of society was incomplete without having a rational understanding. So, every element of society could have to be explained from a logical understanding of why the society is such or why the behavior of individual are taking place in different culture in different society. However, such a proposition was criticized by Amitai Etzioni, but a majority of sociologists look forward to the mixture of economy and sociology, especially for the area study, specialized area study, and some of the areas which were important for the two disciplines to merge. One was to study labor market, to understand labor in terms of understanding the cultural dimension of labor or to understand the economy of labor. So, the political economy of factories, industries, it was required that sociologists take help or kind of have a rational understanding. The second area was to understand social stratification. So, basically say by say 1940s, 50s, a number of economists started steadily working towards studying social problems, and this was done in two ways. Number one, a small group of economists continued to work in the tradition of original institutionalism. That is, they discussed the emergence and operation of economic institution through a broad view of economic theory that included sociological perspective. The second method of studying social problems used by economists were economists who had developed a novel type of institutionalism, and this came to be known as new institutional economy. This was different from the old institutionalism. Why? Because the latter started explaining the emergence and operation of economic institution using maximizing utility principle. So, when we look into the course say 1990s, full-fledged discipline, sub-discipline of economic sociology comes into being, and some of the main themes or the core areas which were studied by the economic sociologists were the role of network in the economy, that is network analysis. The second was structure of different economic organization, and third, which was kind of more tilted towards a sociologist, was the role of culture in economic life. So, when we look into these three themes, we see that the network approach became very popular at Harvard in the 1970s through the teaching of Harris White, who was very interested in economic topics. His student used it differently. One of his students was Mark Granovetter, who analyzed the role of that the network of information play when people get jobs. So, he was kind of using the network analysis to understand the emotions, the way in which people express their excitement as here with a specific case of getting an employment. Another scholar was Viviana Zelzier. Viviana Zelzier was a sociologist who looked at the role of culture in economic life, what she calls the historical interplay between human values and market. She studied three topics from this perspective: life insurance, the social value of children, and special types of money. Zelzier added new vigor to economic sociology of the 1980s, but there is no clarity how far the cultural explanation would be considered valid. So, when we look into the growth or the historical analysis of economic sociology and the emergence of new economic sociology, we see there are three major traditions which would help us to traverse through the historical analysis. Number one is the German tradition of Wirtschaftssoziology, because this is a German term which is used here, and the origin of the German tradition is in the historical school of economics, and the most important contributor or the pioneer in this tradition is Max Weber. Max Weber, we will discuss his work on economy and society, on the relation between religion and economy, was kind of a beginning of this entire discourse of economic sociology. The second tradition is the French tradition of sociology economique, which is the coming in from the France, and scholars like Saint-Simon, Durkheim in the early 1920th, and the followers of Durkheim gave shape to the French tradition. The third tradition is the work of the economy and society, especially coming in from sociologists in the United States in the 1950s, and the important scholars are Talcott Parson and Neil Smeltzer. So, we will try to briefly understand the three traditions. The first is the German tradition, and the period is 1819 to 1930. This tradition emerged around the end of 19th century, and the most important approach of the German tradition was historical and comparative. It used comparison between institutions, nations, and civilization. An attempt was made to show that the study of economics belonged to cultural sciences, which meant that an interpretative approach was used. The subject matter of study in the German tradition was economic development and the role of state in the economy. The main contributors were Max Weber, Sombart, and Schumpeter. The German economic sociology owes much of its strength to the historical school in economics and to Karl Marx's masterful analysis in Capital. German tradition emerged as an attempt to close the gap in the method of the historical and theoretical economist. According to Weber, economic sociology could serve as a bridge between these two by drawing simultaneously from both historical research and analytical theory. One of the pioneers of the German tradition was Friedrich List, who introduced the notion of nation into economics in 1841 in his work National System of Political Economy. Few years later, Wilhelm Rosser announced that economists must use historical and comparative method. So, here the legitimization of the merger of economic and sociology was completed. The greatest achievement of the German tradition cannot be attributed to the older historical school. The older school, the key members were Rosser, Reis, and Hildebrand. The achievement of the tradition was also due to the contribution of Gustav and Smoller, later known as young historical school. So when we look into the German tradition, we kind of get impressed by the work of Max Weber, and he is considered as laying down the foundation of economic sociology. Two key themes in Weber's work were economic sociology should be interpretative, and interpretative was that we need to understand social reality not as an objective reality, but in terms of the meaning which is assigned during the course of interaction. So, the interpretation is important. Social reality cannot be seen as a given fact, and therefore, Verstehen became significant method in sociology. The second theme of Weber was power plays a key role in the economy. So, economy is not only in terms of what is happening in the market, what is the demand and supply, price value, utility and efficiency. It is also very much regulated by political power or even economic power for that matter. So, in economy and society, a work for which Max Weber is known, Weber says that the notion of economic power is indispensable to economic sociology. The exact term he used in this work is Verfügungsgewalt, or the power of control and disposal. He also attempted in his work to develop a sociology of market. The second tradition is the tradition of French sociology. Now, the period of the French and the German sociology is the same. From 1819 to 1930, this is a period where different scholars in Germany and a different set of scholars in France were kind of giving their contribution, indirectly leading to the growth of a sub-discipline called economic sociology. So, both German and the French economic sociologists emphasized the role of institution in the economy. Both stressed that the method should be historical and comparative. Both German and French tradition assigned a central place to cultural symbolic dimensions. In German tradition, through the concept of Verstehen, and in French economic sociology through Durkheim's concept of collective representation. So, symbolic meaning becomes important, whether we are trying to understand what is happening in the market or we are trying to understand the religious dimension. Symbolic meaning was important for both economists and sociologists. Another important after Durkheim, a name which is kind of more familiar in the French tradition or French sociology is Marcel Mauss. For Marcel Mauss, economic phenomena are not only material but collective representation that direct attitudes of society towards material objects. Some difference also exists between the two, that is the German tradition and the French sociology. While Weber and Schumpeter spoke of capitalism and its struggle, the group around Durkheim talked of industrial society and lack of cohesion. So, the problem that the two tradition was studying was different. So, Weber was kind of more preoccupied with the emergence of modern form of capitalism, the growth of rationality, the growth of bureaucracy, scientific thinking, whereas in France the focus was more towards industrialization and how industrialization was influencing the social fabric in terms of changing the solidarity from mechanical to organic solidarity. So, cohesion, collective representation was central to the French sociologist. While in Germany, economists tried to find place for economic sociology alongside with economic theory, the Durkheimian wanted to replace economy with economic sociology. The major French economic sociologists consisted of Emile Durkheim, Marcel Mauss, Simeon Holbach and Borgens brothers. But most of important contribution has been from Durkheim. Durkheim suggested an analysis of the origin of the respect for property, tracing to fear inspired by religious taboo, but was otherwise not interested in economic sociology. So, Durkheim's central focus was to understand collective representation. He was more concerned about solidarity, how there was kind of collectivity, collective consciousness emerging from the cultural realm, and therefore, in his work on understanding religion, the elementary forms of religious life, he tries to develop a relation between religion and the collectivity, and through that he was kind of giving more significance to society as a social group that should be kind of considered more sacred than believing in a religion which is assumed to be considered as deity worship or kind of certain sets of beliefs and practices. Following Durkheim, Marcel Mauss' works, The Gift, is a brilliant study of gift giving, exchange, and the role that economy played in pre-industrial society. Like Durkheim, Marcel Mauss believed that many modern economic institutions have their origin in religious behavior, and economic sociology therefore needs to be complemented by anthropological research. Scattered throughout the work of Marcel Mauss, one also finds the most interesting comments on a variety of economic topics. Marcel Mauss was suggested that money can be seen as a way of adjusting the process of production and consumption to one another, and also that the essence of economy consists in collective weighting. So, this whole idea that modernity, globalization, industrialization was taking society towards individualism is negated by both Durkheim and Mauss, and they are trying to focus that even in rational modern scientific society, collectivity is important, or it holds the key to understand economy and society. Saint-Simon and Auguste Comte also had impact on the French economic sociology. Saint-Simon coined the term and studied industrial society. It influenced Auguste Comte's three stages law and Durkheim's division of labor in society. One of Durkheim's followers, Francois Simeon, launched several attacks on economic theory. Francois Simeon, who insisted that social science should deal with long waves of history rather than single spectacular events. His own branch of economic sociology was known as positive method in economics and was radically different from the Annales school, that is the work of the French sociologist, and it insisted on excluding all subjective elements from analysis. However, the influence of Durkheim on economic sociology is kind of considered far more than Francois Simeon. The third tradition is US tradition of economy and society. The development of economic sociology in the United States has been quite different from what was taking place in Germany and France. No vigorous economic sociology emerged around the turn of century, and no major work on economy was produced by American sociologists. It was only by 1950s that a serious attempt was made to launch economic sociology as a distinct research area. Even then, it was preferred to refer to economy and society rather than economic sociology. So, the historical understanding of economic sociology is different from what was happening in Germany and France. So, there was an acceptance of a subdiscipline of economic sociology. In America, there was still an understanding that they were trying to understand the connect between two institutions rather than the coming up of a new discipline. One reason that economic sociology had difficulty coming into being in the United States was the hostility or indifference of the economist. In the 1980s, the American economist made it clear to sociologists that they should avoid economic topic and focus solely on social topics. This alienation was further exaggerated as mathematical economists gained popularity and anything social was squeezed out of economic. Charles Cooley, one of the early sociologists, was insightful in his emphasis on the importance of communication in the economic process. Cooley's work resulted in a steady flow of transportation and communication work at the Chicago School. The Chicago sociologists, on the other hand, made little contribution to economic sociology because they respected the social division of labor by assigning economic problems to economists and social problem to sociologists. They did, however, make significant contribution to new subfield of sociology, and these were sociology of profession and industrial sociology. One important figure or the pioneer of the understanding between the relationship of economy and society is no other but Talcott Parsons. During the 1950s, Talcott Parsons became convinced that institutionalism was a dead end and that neoclassical theory was far superior. He pioneered a new approach known as the analytical factor view, which was a forerunner of the economy and society perspective. The debate between economy and society became much more lively with Carl Polanyi's work in economic anthropology, Herbert Simon's work in behavioral economy. So, these two philosophers, scholars, Carl Polanyi and Herbert Simon, kind of started the understanding of a subdiscipline which would focus more on the integration of economy and society. Niels Meltzer went to write the first economic sociology textbook. So, when we look into the understanding of how these three traditions, the German tradition, the French tradition and the United States, the relation between economy and society was taking place, it kind of gives us an understanding that this new discipline of economic sociology was kind of emerged and taken place. So, new economic sociology has been very successful to explore the structure of firms, the links that exist between corporation and the larger milieu. But there are a lot of kind of gaps, or there are a lot of areas which has kind of remained out of the purview of sociologists and economists. So, there is kind of still lot of progress that has to be made. There are kind of little areas or weaknesses that economists are more in kind of prone towards understanding institutions, and sociologists are more diverted to understand the cultural dimension. So, a little bit of bias or assumption kind of creates a gap between the two disciplines, and therefore, a lot of more progress has to be made. Explanation and interpretation of economic reality remains the two fundamental tasks for the field ahead. To understand modern economic order, economic sociologists need to conduct empirical research of money, media and economic ideologies. So, basically for the new economic sociologists to take a kind of more profound impact and emerge as a discipline is to kind of do away with the differences in the methods and converge towards understanding society by looking at an integrated understanding of economy and society. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.